Hi, hello everyone. So I'm going to talk about continuous learning through communities of practice and how to build one. But before I start, I'm going to tell you a little story about Sara. And Sara is a scrum master. She's been a project manager for a number of years, and she works for an organisation that has decided that they're going to go agile. And what they've decided is they're going to send Sara on a certified Scrum Master course. So she goes off for a couple of days, has a great time, and comes back, does the multiple choice questionnaire that you do at the end of those things. If anyone's done it, a few smiles around the room. And she comes back to her organisation, and she has this team that she needs to run, and she's kind of getting on with it, but she's struggling a bit, and the team are struggling a bit, and are the only team trying to do it within the organisation. So she's frustrated, she hasn't really got the support that she needs, and she's kind of thinking that the old way of doing project management was the right way. And the project's not going very well. She's feeling quite responsible for it. And generally she thinks this is rubbish. So being a Scrum Master sucks. Don't quote me on that. Familiar story? I mean, this is a story that I see in a lot of places. So she's not feeling supported. She doesn't have what she needs. And she's finding it very difficult. Actually, one of the number one reasons for people leaving a job is, I'm going to take this quote completely out of context, and I can't remember who said it, is that people don't feel appreciated. So she's not feeling appreciated. Okay, so my name is Emily. I love building communities. I have a bit of a problem, I think. I just kind of keep doing it. I've just set up another meetup just the other day. So a bit about my cred. So I'm actually an agile consultant, so I'm not going to talk too much about continuous delivery in this particular talk. So up on the left there, Government Digital Services, where I worked for a couple of years as the Head of Agile Delivery. That was a lot of that was about community building and getting people to interact and learn. Yeah, Hackney was an online community forum that I set up and run for the place that I used to live, which was Hackney. Agile on the Bench is a meetup that I run. Us to another organisational community that I kind of kick-started them a little bit going in the right direction. 2E8 was a meetup, and the other two down here were WordPress meetups. So it's a bit about kind of my habit of forming communities. And there are different types of communities as well. And I've mentioned a few of them. So there's communities of interest. And this, I would say, is a community of interest, people that are interested in a similar subject getting together. Communities of place, so like the Hackney thing, so people that are within an area, if you're ever part of a residents association. I've done that in the past as well. Communities of action, where people get together around a common cause, and communities of practice. There's some more, but I'm going to talk specifically about communities of practice. And I wanted to distinguish them a little bit from other types of communities as well. There's some slight nuances there. So there's this great book, and there's a guy that's been doing research into communities of practice for many years called Etienne Wenger, and he's now a Wenger trainer, and he works with his wife, who does a lot about social learning. So communities of practice is groups of people who share a concern or a passion for something they do and learn how to do it better as they interact regularly. And that's the kind of definition that I take when I'm talking about communities of practice as well. So very much about communities of practice within an organisational setting is where my experience comes from. Has anyone seen the Spotify engineering culture video? Lots of few nods around the room. So this is quite similar. This is actually very similar. It's kind of how we used to work, or how it works at Government Digital Service. So you have this idea of programs and teams within programs, and communities of practice that cut across those. So people within those teams that share a role then kind of get together in particular ways. So what you have is your team and your program is the what you do on a day-to-day. It's like your tasks. And your community of practice is the how you do it. So it's another way to think about communities of practice. It's always this, I always think of, you've got this community of practice here of people practicing a similar thing. Actually, it's about keeping you honest and keeping you kind of honest to your craft rather than getting pulled in another direction. Yeah, quite similar to the squads and tribe model at Spotify. So, before I carry on, I just wanted to get a bit of a sense of, there's quite a few of you here, which is great, about why people are interested in this particular topic. Is anyone here part of a community of practice? Couple? Anyone? Yeah?
Yeah. I'm project manager, so project management community within ITV.
Cool.
It's not particularly clearly defined, it's an area, but it does exist.
Cool. Is anyone looking to set one up at all? Couple around the room. Seems to be quite popular at the moment. Any other reasons why people are here in general? Anyone want to say?
To learn some more tips about that sort of thing. So we've sort of started one where we're based.
Yep.
But I feel like we're sort of making up as we go along. So to get some more examples of people.
Yeah, I'm doing a bit of research at the moment because I'm also writing a short book about communities of practice, which should be out early next year. Hey. So this, a lot of what's in this talk is based on that as well. So I'm going to divide this up slightly into reasons why you need one first, and then a bit about how you go about building one, or from my experience, what I've seen as relevant about how you go about building one. I'm going to start with 5 reasons why you should build a community of practice. So I'm always thinking of this is a bit of your business case stuff if anyone is thinking about building one and wants a bit of money. So 5 reasons why you would want one. Firstly, it promotes organisational learning. And any organisation that isn't learning and adapting is not going to be able to respond to change, so it's always going to be a bit behind anything. And training is not equal to learning, and that's quite important. And I think a lot of organisations don't really realise that. A lot of organisations think learning is about a training budget. So actually, hands up who has a training budget. Anyone got a training budget? Couple around the room? It's probably not quite enough to do what you want to do with it.
It's enough to buy pizza.
Enough to buy pizza. The right kind of training. Sorry?
Not quite enough to do anything.
Yeah. Yeah. So and also, so training, you often think of training as going and doing a course, maybe going to a conference, something that's about absorbing information. And there's a place for that kind of training, there's a place for classroom training, but actually it needs to be supported by other types of learning as well. And more importantly, the chance to put that learning, those concepts into practice too. So this model, people seen this model before? So David Kolb published this learning styles model in 1984. And it's very much about experiential learning. So you have a new experience, you reflect on that experience, then you go through abstract conceptualization, where you concluding and learning from that experience, and then actually you need to try that out for it to embed as well. So if you're not doing that whole thing and you haven't got the room to try those things out, then actually that kind of learning is not going to stick. And whilst I was at Government Digital Service, I got a little bit tired of lots of departments saying, how do we learn this agile thing? Everyone said, how do I go and learn agile? And I wanted to give some guidance. So I got a bunch of people together that had, learned this agile thing through experimentation or trial or whatever, and got them to do a bit of their timelines. This is one of their timelines and the things that they learned along the way. I think this, yeah, and kind of good points and bad points along the way. So and we came out with some guidance, which is on the GDS Service Design Manual, which echoes what David Kolb was talking about as well. So there's what I really wanted to get across when I was talking about this stuff to departments is actually, you know, the shadowing and learning from others is really important. And so seeing things in practice, some formal training helps give you some concepts of what you're doing. Self-initiated learning, so that bit where you're reading blogs, going to meetups, reading books, all that kind of stuff. Sharing ideas and support from others is something that those, you know, all of these things like communities of practice can give you that, as well as small experiments and running short projects. So that's the kind of key, as we all know, learning comes from failing and also questioning and retrospecting. Another nice quote from somebody who published some stuff is Albert Bandura, that talks about social learning theory in 1977, saying that most human behaviour is learned through modelling, so observing others, one forms an idea of how behaviours are performed. So actually it's you get that learning from a group of other people doing something similar is really important. Hence communities of practice. Okay, so second reason that you need communities of practice in your organisation is that it helps break down organisational silos. So anyone got any silos in their organisation? Anyone feeling that pain? Just a little bit. So silos can form quite easily when people feel stronger connections to the group, one group of people than another group of people. And communication can be quite difficult between them, which means makes work difficult. So obviously it's detrimental to an organisation. And has anyone said anything like this? Ever felt that? I was thinking about, when I wrote this, I was kind of thinking about my the housing association that used to be the freeholders of the flat that I used to live in, and I'd just say, that bunch of people, they're all rubbish at their job and they've got no idea. And they become this amorphous kind of blob of just crap, rather than actually individuals. It's that when you kind of take people away from people and kind of have them as groups, that you get those problems. The best illustration of this is, so you have your kind of guitar playing beavers team over there, and your keyboard playing ducks over here. And actually, if you can get those two groups of people together, then you can have a guitar playing duck-billed platypus. I am not going to best pitch ever. It's not actually my illustration, and you can buy this on a t-shirt, threadless, so if anyone's interested in that. But that's so not only once you start getting people together that are across different silos, can you have better communication, but adding up to 2 + 2 means greater than 4, so that's also useful to know. Because those communities of practice cross programs and teams, they help people to start thinking about people as people and not as that homogenous group that are rubbish at something. So another reason, communities of practice help with sharing knowledge and building better practices. I'm anti the phrase best practices personally. I like to say better practices, because best according to who. If you think about knowledge as an iceberg, and you have this explicit knowledge that's obvious, and it lives in books and it's easy to give to other people, and you have this implicit knowledge or tacit knowledge that kind of sits under the surface, and this is your knowledge that lives in your culture, and it's you kind of pass it on through people rather than through kind of anything else. I've been in organisations that have wikis that desperately try and keep knowledge and share it in some kind of way, and it just becomes this blob of rubbish that no one trusts anymore, because it's just a load of crap. So it's kind of this problem that's often solved with technology, but is never really solved. And what you start to have when you have a community of practice is actually the community starts to own that knowledge and starts to share it without you having to pull it out and explicitly write it down. Which is very important, because people don't stay in jobs, they move around a lot. This 4.4 year average also says that actually people that were born between the early 80s and 2000s move around even faster than that. And I'd say in this industry, people don't stay around in jobs for long. So actually, if as an organisation you're not investing in kind of that, keeping that tacit knowledge somewhere, then it goes straight out the door and you're actually just doing that work again every time. But what's even better than that is once you get a bunch of people together, they go from sharing knowledge to solving shared problems to using the collective knowledge of the community to create better practices. So that's where you get your duck-billed platypus guitar player, from people coming together and solving something. Number 4. This picture's great, isn't it? This guy looks so happy with his flamingo. I don't know what's going on there. So actually, getting people together means that they're happier and more motivated. And I came up with found this stat, which was great. Happiness makes people 12% more productive. So next time any of your managers are shouting at you, you can just kind of pull this out and say, you're making me unhappy. Do you want me to be 12% less productive? I'd love someone to try that. That'd be great. Does everyone know Dan Pink's theory of motivation and where we are with motivation? Great TED talk if anyone hasn't seen it. So he talks about the fact that we're at this point where people aren't really motivated by money anymore. They're motivated by these 3 things, which is autonomy, mastery, and purpose. He's kind of missed out a few bits about social interactions because people are motivated by being in social groups as well. And another few things. But actually, what you've got if you're a learning organisation and you're learning together is actually, and you're learning as a profession, then you've got your mastery there. So that's kind of caught there. And I'll come on to a little bit about purpose of a community of practice in a minute as well. But also kind of autonomy. So if the group has the ability to kind of define how it works together and what it's doing, and also is getting better, actually, you're going to have happier people, which then makes you more productive. Great for everyone. And whilst I was at GDS, I was in the position of hiring people, many people. Anyone else here do hiring? A few hiring around the room. So if you're hiring into a profession that has a well-established community of practice that understands its values and its skills, it actually makes it much easier to hire. It's great. And it is a draw for people to join your organisation as well. So I found this made-up bell curve that I have here, that you can be in this fantastic position. Actually, this is your great kind of community skills distribution if you're responsible for a profession. That you have you have a few experts, you have a majority of people that are good at their job, and what that then gives you is the capacity to start bringing in more junior people, but you've got the community support there to help bring them up fairly quickly. And that's what one of the things that I found whilst I was at GDS with a really strong community is that we were able to do that and actually, bring people up to skill them up really fast, which was great. Particularly in an industry where it's really hard to hire people. So those of you put your hands up for hiring, easy, yeah? Really very difficult. And actually, I think it's partly for the fact that the industry's growing and there aren't the amount of people that we need. So actually, it's almost like you need to grow your own, and you need to grow your own to help grow the industry as well. I like to think. So I'm going to move on to how you build one now. Unless anyone had any questions about any of those points. Nope. Cool. So before I do that, I'm going to just talk quickly through the stages of community development. And this is this comes from Etienne Wenger in his book, which has just escaped me for the moment, about communities of practice. And I found this a while back whilst I was involved in the GDS community, and it resonated with me because I found that actually some of the things that I'd seen in the past started to make sense on how a community builds. So you start with some potential. There's maybe loose networks, or there's individuals that kind of get together already and they have the potential of being more connected. And what's really interesting about this model as well is it talks about energy levels. So at that point you have quite low energy levels, and you can almost invert it as well, because if you are somebody that's involved in helping that community survive, or the kind of that core team pushing it forward, is the amount of energy that you need to put in is always almost the other way. So you need quite a bit of energy to get it from potential to coalescing. So coalescing is the point where people start to form connections, and it starts to get exciting because there's something new going on. People start to build trust. As the community moves on from there and it starts to expand, it goes through a maturing stage, and people start to build stronger connections and start to their communications would be a bit deeper as well, as they have that trust, and that's where you start building your better practices and start owning what comes out of the community. And then this kind of holy grail of stewardship is kind of akin to the self-organising team in Agile, that everything will be wonderful, and the community looks after itself, and energy kind of peaks and troughs, but it's kind of a lot less energy from a core leadership group or anything like that. And then potentially have this transformation stage where it needs to change or move on or whatever. And it's something like, it's kind of echoes the Tuckman stages of forming, norming, storming, performing. So there's echoes in there as well. And communities would jump around these as well. I don't know if you see something similar from the community that you're looking after. And having something like this is great, because it starts to go, because if you go through a coalescing period where there's huge amounts of energy and then suddenly it dips, you can go, what's going on? But actually that's quite natural for that to happen. So I'm going to talk a little bit about now kind of taking communities through some of those stages. And I like to start with the idea of creating the right environment as well. So a community of practice actually needs the right type of environment to grow. You can grow them, kind of organically, bottom up, but there's a point where an organisation needs, or people need to create the right space for that thing to grow. And one of those things is there needs to be a safe to learn environment. I don't like to say safe to fail, safe to learn. And that's about there being trust within the community, so that the community is a trusted space. It's welcoming and friendly. It's always important amongst any bunch of people like that all experiences are welcome, that it isn't just this kind of some people know more than other people, so they're teaching them, that actually everyone's experiences are welcome. And that conflicts don't get out of hand, that kind of thing. There's kind of two schools of thought which I came across, is having a room with a door that you can close and keeping people in that room, not keeping people in that room, only locking them in the room, only inviting certain people into that room and not necessarily opening it up to everyone. And I think that's quite important, that people need to want to be there, so there's a kind of self-identification, but actually you're not just going, right, everyone come in, otherwise it's just a company meeting, I think. And much like principles in the Agile Manifesto, meeting up face-to-face is really important. So having the space to get together on a regular basis, being physically in the same space. Obviously, any of you that work in distributed teams will know that it's possible, but it's harder. And having some face-to-face builds trust as well. So I have been involved in a community that was spread out across the country. which was much slower and harder to build, but actually we made sure that people were travelling to different points of the country, so there was a little bit easier sometimes for some people than it was for others, but at least it gave people a chance to see each other and start to get to know who each other were. Support from your organisation is important if you can have it. So this is where I've seen actually it be really successful is that people are actually given time during their working day to dedicate time to building this thing. I have seen the situation where, you know, somebody suddenly has a new objective to build a community of practice, but they have that on top of their job, and that means that actually it never really happens because they don't have the time and energy to put into it, and it becomes less of a priority than actually doing their day-to-day role. So that's quite hard. Fortunately, whilst I was at GDS, I kind of had plenty of time to do that, and it actually meant that the community was able to flourish. The other thing that's handy at this point, or at some point, is that the organisation, or there is some kind of money somewhere, that's quite good, so that you can actually spend it on social events or meeting space or any kind of equipment that you might need. Post-it notes, always post-it notes. Another thing that will really help the community is to have somebody that's empowered to support that community. The way, similarly to Spotify at GDS, as the community leader, whatever, head of, I also line managed most of that community, so it was direct reports into me rather than elsewhere, and that meant that I could fight for those people if I needed to. It's back to the kind of help to give them keep them on the straight and narrow, or keep them honest to their role. So an organisation actually empowering people to make decisions, set standards, and have a commitment to developing people, supporting and protecting them is actually really important if you can have it. This can be quite a hard step, identifying actually who is in your community. So what I like to think of here, so actually you've got a community, haven't you? You set up. How did it come about? What was the impetus?
So it sort of evolved. The company I worked for was a duty consultancy. So we were looking for something to sort of generate a bit of content and a bit of what we call thought leadership and stuff like that. So we started up these streams of development and like things like big data and skill technology.
Okay.
And then it sort of, you know, we tried that for a bit, didn't really work, sort of just finding our feet. And the one in particular that I've been part of is sort of just more of a development stream where we've sort of, you know, just gone back to first principles, you know, fundamentals of development and stuff. And we sort of just, you know, we started from a couple of people, and then we just sort of grew that out and started meeting regularly, and then that evolved into, it just kept on sort of snowballing into what we have today. So
cool. So I mean, it's useful to think about kind of role, family of roles as well in that kind of situation. So if you're kind of going from complete scratch, it's like who actually are you trying to support? But often you'll find, so often that might be that there's a job description that you're trying to support. But often you'll find there's kind of existing connections that you can build on already. So maybe there's a bunch of people that do the same job that meet up already, and they've got a kind of loosely formed group. There's one organisation that I joined that did have the kind of Scrum Master type role, met regularly, but they kind of met regularly to moan for an hour and a half once a week. And so I kind of went, that's great, let's take that and do something more constructive with that time. And you can still have your moan, but maybe that's in the pub or maybe just once a month you have one of those sessions where everybody can talk about how terrible everything is. But also kind of at this early stage, you'll probably find that you hit people that know each other or connections that you already have. So if you're in a large organisation, it can be quite hard to find those people that are the right people to join your group. And as the community starts to get bigger, you kind of need to work harder, and the community itself needs to work harder to find other people that should be there, other people that they can support. So I did come up with a set of questions which I've tried out previously about how you find the right people to join the community, and this is back to do you open it up to everyone and just say whoever wants to come, or do you make it a closed space? And one of the things that I found whilst I was at GDS is we had this Agile Delivery community, and everyone said, well, I'm Agile Delivery, can I join the community? We all want to know about this stuff, and I wanted to keep it very safe so people felt comfortable talking to each other, that they could close the door and not just have kind of anyone and everyone wandering in. So the questions that I came up with, so do they share a role, environment and goals with the other people within the community? Do they have shared day-to-day challenges? So are they facing the same things on a day-to-day basis? Can they learn from the community? And there's a point there, actually, if you stopped at that point, most people would probably say, yes, I'm part of that community. But the really crucial one for me is, can the community learn from them as well? So it's not just that people are coming and taking something from it, it's they're actually bringing something to the table as well. So I'll run through an example. Sorry for the project management examples all the time. There's a couple of project managers around the room. So this is Paul. He's an IT project manager. And so for the community of project managers, does he share a role, similar environment and goals? Yes, he has to make sure projects are running well. He has to consider budgets, make sure teams are motivated, keep clients happy and manage suppliers. So yeah. Does he share the same day-to-day challenges as other people in the community? So similar issues to other IT project managers, iron out conflicts, manage expectations, communicate with other parts of the organisation, and negotiate supplier contracts? Would he be able to learn things from other people in the community that would imagine that said him, and make him better at his job? So yes, so this is back to the example of Sarah, the Scrum Master earlier. He's the only project manager on his team, and he'd benefit greatly from understanding how other people tackle the same problems he faces. And would people be able to learn from him? So yes, he's been working in a similar role for a number of years, learned a great deal that he can share with others, and be a great person to bring in. So in that example, you kind of go, yes, that person is perfect, let's bring them in, they can be part of this wonderful community. Okay. And also it's important with a lot of this stuff, it's all trial and error too. So if you don't get it right the first time, you can just carry on. Try again. Is anyone at that stage now? Looking, kind of got you're starting to build something up. So what the kind of advice I'd give to anyone starting a new community is start thinking about first few meetings and how to build trust and connections, because actually you're not going to get anywhere with a community if people don't trust each other and start to have those social connections. So it's important to start kind of using icebreakers, getting people together, maybe getting people to start talking about the types of projects that they're working on and how those overlap. And like any regular thing, I'd always say set a rhythm and agree when that community should meet. So always set the same time so that people know exactly when it's going to happen. One thing I did with one community was actually alternate. It's slightly confusing. We had a Tuesday meeting, but then we alternated between Tuesdays and Thursdays because some people could never make the Thursday meeting, so they could make the Tuesday meeting, just to make sure that people always had a chance that they could come along. if anyone isn't familiar with Simon Sinek, he has some great talks about leadership. And he also talks about the golden circle, which I'd apply here and apply to anything that you're doing in any type of project. That it's always important to start with why. So in the centre of anything, you have the why. Why are you doing something? So what's the reasoning behind it? Then how you do it, and then what you're doing. So this is hopefully familiar to every single project that you're all working on. You all understand what the vision is and why you exist. And a community would be no different. So starting with why, starting with a vision, and letting that bunch of people own that vision as well, and kind of buy into it and have some influence on it as well. But also understanding how you'll work together. So do people have things like team charters and principles that they've worked on? A couple of shake heads around the room, a couple of nods around the room. So this idea of agreeing how you'll treat each other, kind of principles, ways that you'll work together, and how you'll work together. You should get one. Or how you might call each other out if things aren't right. So much like any team, I'd say a community is very much the same. And what you'll do together as well. So creating a backlog, I think, is important for any group of people, as well as you've got your team backlog, but how are you going to work together? What kind of things are you going to work on as a backlog? Is a great thing to do because it gives you goals to work on too. And it also starts to think about, if you're a group of people that's trying to achieve something, is how might you measure how successful your community is being, which is always useful to look back on, but it might be useful for you to talk to your stakeholders or anyone that's invested in you creating it. So I've got another 5 ways, and this is 5 ways to get value from community interactions. And from the experience that I've had from a couple of these communities, these are 5 different types of meetings or interactions that you can have that I think are really important. So I am going to go on to the next slide. That should be there. So pub, of course, really important. Alcohol is a great way of building trust and social interactions. So actually creating time to build those social interactions, much the same as any team that you're on, you should be doing that with communities as well. That doesn't have to be in the pub, though. You can do it elsewhere, of course. Taking time to learn as a group. Does anyone do things like coding carters, stuff like that? It's where you get together and you're learning together, and actually you start to build quite close connections because you're learning together. So what Wenger talks about, which is great, which is this idea that you design your group for learning, but you don't design your learning. So you create the opportunities for people to learn together, but you don't kind of create a curriculum for them to follow. And again, all this can be done as a group. And so things that you can do there is presentations in talks, so inviting people in or encouraging people from within the community or the organisation to do talks, presentations, visits and tours. Whilst I was at GDS, we came here actually and joined people's stand-ups and had a nose in on what ITV were up to, and just had a look at how other people do things. So sometimes getting out of your own environment and seeing how other people do things, or deal with challenges that you have as well, is really important. Games and workshops, so different ways to learn through play, kind of fun things, and crossovers with other communities. So if you have a successful community and of practice and there's another community of practice, how can you start getting together and building things together as well? And problem solving and building better practices is another great way people can learn from each other. So I'm sure everyone is familiar with pairing. Has anyone tried triads? I'm not talking about kind of gangsters. So actually, well, But you can go further. Mobbing, anyone done any mobbing? A couple of mobbing around the table. So actually, problem solving in groups of threes I've found to be a really great way of getting people to work together, in that you sometimes with twos, particularly if you have kind of a mentoring pair, you have this idea of master and expert and non-expert, so you have often information flowing one way. When you have a group of three, it actually tends to flow between them. Also, you have more opportunities to at least two people get together. If there's three of you, it can be if there's only two of you, it can be quite hard just to schedule diaries sometimes. So I found that as a just kind of breaking down some of the just putting two people together. Talking and asking questions. Another thing, getting community to propose topics that they want to discuss and creating a space for people to have discussions. So bringing up subjects and just kind of talking through them is great. And also, as you go through this and you go through anything, retrospecting regularly and looking at how you're doing and seeing if what you're doing is still relevant to people and still getting value for them is important. So growing your community, as some of you might be in this position right now. So I mentioned earlier that when you start something, actually you might not be able to reach out to all the people that you want to, or you might only be able to reach out to the people that are in your immediate circle. So it's important to start thinking about how can you start reaching other people, and are there people in your community that have access to other people that they can reach out to? So how can you get further than that? Also, any other formal, informal structures you can start getting the message out. And also thinking about marketing as well. So what are your success stories, or what's the message that you're trying to tell people? How can you get that message out to people to get them to start self-identifying, so you don't have to do all the work in getting them. And what's also important to think about is actually you have different types of members within any type of community. You kind of have these core members, that are the people that make sure things happen, and you have active members that turn up to mostly everything. Probably have this at this particular meetup as well. Occasional members that come along sometimes, and peripheral members that are kind of lurkers and new people. Those people on those web forums that only ever turn up every now and then, or just kind of read everyone else's messages but never say anything. And this outside members, which are kind of stakeholders and sponsors. I think I mentioned earlier that communities of practice should be, people should volunteer to be part of them. You're not forcing people in. So you do have this kind of difference in types of members, and only if you start to lose all your active members do you want to start considering if that becomes a problem, or if you've got any of the kind of peripheral occasional members causing any problems, you might want to think about what you do about that. But that's quite a normal state. And when communities move towards self-organising and self-sustaining, actually you want to start thinking about if you are part of that core team, how do you start stepping back from that leadership role and allowing other people to take it on, and allowing that group to become self-organising. What you often find within any group is that those people that do want to lead will start to self-identify because they start to be passionate and interested in things, and actually you should let them, and not necessarily just hold on to this is my group. Actually step back a bit and let them do that. And it's also growing reach and impact. At the point where your community feels stable, when do you start opening the door and start letting other people in? Or do you go out and start telling other people about what you do and selling the message? So one thing I found useful, because so many people were at GDS were interested in learning about Agile or learning different things about Agile, is that we set up a kind of lunch and learn that the community owned, did different talks on stuff that other people had said they were interested in, and started inviting them in at that point. So it started growing the reach and impact of the community. Also, what you probably want to do, because this is all about professions and communities of practice and the profession within the organisation, is identifying what skills that you might want to work on as well. So thinking about what skills do people need to do their role, and do people in the community have those skills, or can that community help them build those skills? I think I think job descriptions in organisations are fascinating. They generally don't really say what the thing is. Anyone got a job description that says what their job is? No. Actually, a great place to find out, to get that job description together, is to get that community together and get them to write it themselves and then see where people might have gaps. So I did an exercise with the community a little while back, community of practice a little while back, where I got everyone together. I love this. This is amazing. Being a person of high skill. Got everyone together, kind of writing post-it notes, everything of all the things that they think that covered their role and things that they do on a regular basis, which helped us kind of go, well, actually, this is what this role looks like, maybe not what other people think it looks like. And then got people to identify which of those skills that they needed to develop. And used this kind of model as well, the Shuhari. So a whole bunch of list of skills, and got people to say, were they, so Shu is whereas kind of you need somebody, or you need something to tell you how to kind of walk you through that particular thing. Ha, where you start to understand the principles and you can start doing that thing on your own. And Re is kind of where you create your own approaches and adapt what you do to particular circumstances. So this is a martial arts term often used in many agile things. So getting everyone to get their skills together and kind of self-identify where they feel their confidence level in each of those areas are, which helps people to start develop their own kind of personal development plan, but to do that within the context of there's, what they actually want to learn rather than what they're told that their job description is. So kind of getting people to create their personal backlogs as part of their professional development plans within that community of practice. So that's that one. And what you can do then as well, so you've got this entire resource, not people resource. You've got this whole kind of bunch of people that have skills and people that want to learn skills, and that's where you can start actually matching up those people in those pairs and in those triads, people shadowing other people, kind of getting them together and starting building those skills from within that community. So that's, again, away from that training budget and actually to real people learning real things through experience and seeing how other people do it. And observations as well, something that I found really useful in the past. So just kind of loads of information. Final point on self-sustaining communities. So this idea of kind of self-organising team and self-sustaining communities is this, this important high kind of mecca that you need. And I'm not going to give you all the answers about how to get there, sorry. But I will kind of recap on the things that I think that you can't really have self-sustaining communities without all the things that I've mentioned. So without kind of organisational support, without ownership of leadership, so actually the community starting to own its own leadership and starting to own its own community, without people actually being engaged in what's going on, without safety and trust, without a shared vision and relevant goals and a rhythm to keep revisiting those vision and those goals, and without social learning. I wanted a picture of kind of unicorns here because it's like the point, the kind of amazing point where the community will keep going on its own. Just kind of one last point is that community can only exist as long as the members believe they have something to contribute or gain from it, because it is people volunteering to be part of it, they need to feel like they've got something to gain from it for it to continue. So yes, that's me. I have got a book in progress which covers a lot of those things, and a bit of a practical guide. So if anyone is interested, they can go to this link, which will also be in the slides, which I'll share around later. Cool. Thanks.